All right, strength training and conditioning. As we talked about, this is the coordination with the exercise component we discussed the other day. So conditioning, we got to bring something to the desired state of use, meaning you got to figure out what the goals are. You got to understand what they're doing. Cardiovascular conditioning, strength conditioning. There's two components when it comes to conditioning, muscle conditioning as well as what we truly think of conditioning cardiovascularly. Priorities when you're designing a program. You want to think about when you're designing a program, what the goals are, what's the starting point, where is the athlete at, how long is their season, how often will you be able to see them. These are the components when you're trying to figure out a training program, what they need, what are their goals. That's the biggest thing. Periodization is the idea that resistance training is going to have peaks and ebbs and flows, highs and lows, and it's going to change because it's going to increase and decrease in volume and intensity depending on what aspect of the training you're in. It's very effective in strength training and motor performance. It's not as effective in cardiovascular performance, but it is still effective. Periodization is a thing that came about in the 50s and 60s, and they realized that the athletes couldn't just keep training and they couldn't just keep getting trained harder and harder and harder and then also have competitions. The goals are the competition. So at the moment of competition, they actually did something that was at the time super surprising. They backed off on their training. And these athletes were actually able to be more successful in their competitions because they backed off their training and they had more ability to be successful. So they backed off their volume of intensity, their volume of workouts, but increased their intensity and had these alternating cycles, and they noticed that there was bigger gains and more improvement and also better results in competition. So there's this general theory, the general adaptation syndrome theory, that their body goes through 3 stages. There's the alarm stage, the resistance phase, and the exhaustion fatigue phase. Just as it looks like, the alarm stage is when you first start something, there's a shock to the system. That's when you get super sore. That's when, the beginning of workouts or beginning of a practice or beginning of the season, that basically everything's kind of hard. You're out of shape a little bit. You're shocked to the body. Then you get the resistance phase. This is when your body is starting to adapt to the demands and is getting stronger. Then there's the exhaustion and fatigue phase. This can happen if you continue to increase training but never take a recovery or have a substantial or sufficient recovery. You obviously don't want to hit the exhaustion fatigue phase at the point of competition. That's not going to help you. So the key to periodization is these recovery periods. So with different loads, challenge different muscle fibers. So you want to challenge one group of muscles and then rest, let them recover. But while they're resting, you can challenge another group at the same time. The example is using shoulder day versus leg day. You're not going to go shoulder, 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 shoulder. You're going to shoulder, leg, back, shoulder, leg, back, like a rotation. Same concept. That's how you're going to get stronger and increase your hypertrophy or your muscle gains. When we talk about periodization, there's different types of cycles. There's a quadrennial cycle, macrocycle, mesocycle, microcycle, and just workouts in general. This is when you're trying to figure out your goals. Is it a 4-year, multi-year plan? Meaning, are you trying to shoot for the Olympics? You got to have a big goal plan there. But or are you just trying to get a workout in for that day? That's hours versus minutes. Microcycles, it's about a week-long concept. That I think of that perfect example is football. High school football, traditionally they play on Fridays. So Fridays, they get beat up. They use all their energy stores. Saturday, they come in, they do a light shakeout, just get a little movement. That's it. A little stretch action. Then on Monday, they do a little bit more, maybe a lift, get their blood pumping. Then they do a learning day, quote unquote, do a lot of walkthroughs, a lot of play running, maybe a little conditioning, nothing crazy. Tuesday is a hard day. That's a contact day traditionally. Wednesday, depends on the week. Sometimes it's a contact day, sometimes not. But that's a hard day as well for the varsity team. Then Thursday is a complete walkthrough. A lot of times teams don't even wear shoulder pads on that day or cleats. It's a straight up walkthrough. It's almost a rest day. Make sure they know their plays. Then on Friday, they go they play their game. So that's a 1 week cycle. Mesocycle, it's a 3-4 week cycle. We're talking about a season potentially, or an extended period of time. Then we got a macro cycle, that's a less than a year, about a year-long cycle. Depends on your goals, depends on what you want to do. Anytime you have any of these cycles, basically the beginning is going to have high volume, low load, because you're teaching things, you're not as strong, and as your load increases, your volume is going to decrease. So your intensity is going to increase and your technique is going to increase, but your volume actually decreases the whole time. And that's how it lasts over a period of time. So at the competition phase, you don't have a high volume at practice because all of your energy is going towards the competitions. Your competitions are your goals. Now, during the competition, you have high intensity and high volume. So on your practice days, you're going to have super low volume, and some still have some high intensity, but very low volume activity to keep those muscles ready. Block periodization. So this is when you look at a microcycle that's broken up into 3 distinct cycles, mesocycles. So this is, your prep phase, your competition phase, and your season transitional phase. So in the beginning of the prep or preseason, basically we have the concept of working on hypertrophy, strength, power, endurance, high volume, mild intensity that's increasing, skill training that's low and then increasing. Then as we get to competition, notice the volume significantly decreases, but our intensity is high and our skills are high. So now we're basically fine-tuning everything, but we don't need 30 reps of something. You should already know how to do it. You already have the strength. You've already had the gains. You're not going to get gains during your competition phase. The gains are going to happen in the preseason or even during the transitional phase sometimes, or the off season. In the off season, traditionally that's the rest season. That's the active rest. So they're still doing activity, but maybe not sport related or sport specific. Another idea, just another diagram just showing the different cycles. You can have a large cycle and have small cycles in between or within it as well, depending on the day, depending on the week, depending on the goals. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be all of them somewhat combined. So when we talk about off season, this is our transitional phase. So it starts with transitional phase where it's unstructured, recreational activities. Is kind of like your break time. You're still working out, you're still doing things, but there's no real focus. Then you start prepping. Then we got a little cross training happening. I'm a big proponent of cross training. Then you've got the hypertrophy and endurance phase, so low intensity, high volume, not necessarily sport specific, getting you back into shape. Okay, then we got strength phase. So now we're increasing our intensity, working on that moderate volume, and it's getting more sport specific the closer you get to season. Another way to look is also power phase, close to preseason. You want high intensity, low volume, very sport specific, working on those individual drills maybe, like ball handling, different things like that. Then in season or competition period, you've got high intensity and low volume. Okay, so I'm working hard, but maybe not for very long. One way to look at this is very much similar to swimming. We used to call it a taper. So during the season, you work hard all season, swim tons of miles, tons of laps every day, all day long. Then a couple of weeks before a big meet, you call it taper. So it's a very structured, what you swim. It's at high intensity. Maybe you work on starts and sprints, but it's only for, 15, 20 minutes maybe, versus the 2 hours of swimming. Because you have the cardiovascular gains, you have the strength. Now we need to basically maintain, but allow you for rest, allow your body to recover, and allow your body to be primed to compete. So cross-training is another good way to do this, and also you can implement this at any time throughout the year to help with endurance and mediate injuries or impact or just stress upon the body, because it keeps the cardiovascular fitness up, but it changes what you're doing. Sometimes this also helps with the mental game in athletics as well, kind of gives them a break, but you're still keeping them in shape. When you talk about conditioning, you want to make sure that you have all these components involved in conditioning. Is there a progression? Is there a reason? Is there consistency? Is there intensity? Is there individuality? Depending on the sport, depending on the person, depending on the goals, they might need a different workout plan than the guy next to them. And you always want to keep safety as a prime concern as well. We've talked about body movements, active range of motion versus passive range of motion, agonist and antagonist muscles. This comes into play when we're talking about weightlifting a lot. So the agonist muscle is the muscle that contracts or shortens, okay? It produces the movement. The antagonist muscle is the muscle that's stretching, okay? That's against the antagonist muscle. Antagonist is against the agonist muscle, okay? Components of physical fitness. Remember, all of these are a component of physical fitness. You got to touch on all of this to have proper strength and conditioning and proper training. Muscular strength, endurance, flexibility, cardiovascular fitness, nutrition, and body composition. It's all part of the same thing. Don't forget to watch the video also about periodization. Get a little more in depth on periodization exactly, and then to apply that to your periodization and workout project.